Hi, and welcome to Freelance Frontiers, a weekly conversation navigating the future of flexible work. I'm Ray Hames. I'm an agency expat, a brand side leader, and a former freelancer myself. And I'm here with Nick Hammond. Hey, Nick.
How's it going?
Who is a creative freelance expert, creative turned coach. Might have butchered that one this week.
Nailed it.
You are a career freelance creative turned coach. Nick and I are here to chat about both sides of the freelance relationship. And we hope that our listeners will find something in here that will help them smooth out the bumps along the road working with and as freelancers.
And if you have feedback, insights, questions, or would like to join us on a future episode, please drop us a DM. In our last episode, we talked about intellectual property and how to navigate negotiations as well as potential offerings. But today we're going to be talking about how to build growth opportunities for freelancers and the importance of upskilling.
Yeah, so let's start. Talking about career growth as a freelancer, we can kind of dive right into the macro topic here, which is how can freelancers plot a course for career growth without the traditional promotional structures that standard 9-to-5 jobs typically come with? I think that the difference really comes down to self-managing your own career, and that's so specific to your own personal goals, which, if you're in a 9-to-5 job, those are specific to the goals of that company. I know that in the freelance space, and certainly in the freelance hiring space, we've seen a lot of people that call themselves creative directors who are not, in fact, creative directors. And that lack of clarity about the hard skills that you're bringing to the table, or the management experience that you have, can make it really hard for hiring managers to know what a freelancer is really going to be contributing to their organization. And likewise, makes it hard for freelancers to gauge what they should be calling themselves and what they should be charging. So Nick, I'm so curious about your perspective here. Like, you've been a committed freelancer for several years. What's your perspective here?
Yeah, I've seen the same thing in terms of people saying that they are one thing, and then kind of when you start to see that at play, being like, oh, okay, there's a lot of pieces that are missing here for you to be able to really say that. I will say, I think the difficulty here, specifically within the creative side of organizations, comes from the fact that no business really seems to have like a very solid grip on how to manage a creative department. And so you get this kind of disconnected thing where different organizations treat different roles differently. And, your title may not necessarily be completely correlative to what you're actually doing within that role. So I do think that there's, some of that at play there.
Yeah, it's interesting because, there's no rubric for what any given role is. Almost in any, if you're outside of government roles, there's no there's no rubric to say, to be, if you're an associate versus a junior versus a, you hear terms like midweight, kind of anything, whether you're talking about a designer or an engineer or a copywriter. And I think that does make it hard because each company inherently has their own system of layering and promotions and what they want to see for each role. But when you are outside of that system, figuring that out for any new company that you're going to go into in a fractional capacity can be really hard to say, where do I fall in their hierarchy? And what do I need to call myself to align with what they're looking for?
Absolutely. And I think the difficulty here too comes in, like, a lot of times because it's difficult to kind of measure or tell where someone's at, the fallback is always years of experience. And we also know that, just because you've had X years of experience does not necessarily mean that you can function at that level. It just means that somehow you were able to sit there, or even just completely lie about the fact that you were in that type of role for 10 years. And maybe that's not really what was actually going on.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's pros and cons of being able to manage your own career growth. I think that on the pro side, when you have full autonomy over how you want to grow your career, the ball's in your court. You can stay at if you're happy working at a specific level, doing a specific thing, and it works for your lifestyle and you're good at it, good on, there you go. Good on, rinse and repeat,
Absolutely.
And there's, other more exploratory mindsets that say, I want to be a jack of all trades. master of none. I want to learn a little bit of everything. And so I'm going to learn all about, Web3. I'm going to learn all about NFTs. I'm going to learn all about AI. You may not be a deep expert in any of those areas, but that, you get to explore and you get to maybe take on a role here or there that lets you flex what you're learning.
I have
Which I
thoughts on
think,
this.
yeah, I'm interested to hear, because I think what that does, there's two things. One, we know there's a ton of stats that show this, but that freelancers are more aggressive about building their skill sets to stay competitive. They have to, right? And it means that any freelancer that you're bringing into your organization probably has some well-rounded perspective, and arguably more education around a broader range of topics than a fixed traditional in-house team that has done one thing for the last 5 years. I'd love to hear your thoughts
Well,
on self-managed.
Before I get into mine, I wanted to hear from you on like the hiring manager perspective. What are indicators that you look for to understand someone's seniority level when you're seeing them kind of from the outside?
That's a good question. I guess that does help kind of focus the conversation on compare and contrast, because as a hiring manager, whether you're looking for an intern or whether you're looking for a new VP, you are looking for candidates that fit a specific profile. And from my experience, like I was saying, I've hired freelancers in a bunch of different capacities, like as an agency kind of flywheel hiring mechanism on the brand side, hiring freelancers to come in and contract-based work for specific projects. I ran a freelance recruiting company for several years, which is my last company, and I think that across all of those experiences, what I started to really hone in on was portfolios that show progressive impact to prove a level of both hard skills and, if the job calls for managing experience, what that has really both looked like from like how many people have you managed and in what capacity, and what was the result of your management approach. Because again, kind of going back to the generic creative director example, if you haven't managed a creative team, if you're just an ideas person, that is not a creative director in my book. You've got to show that you have an understanding of how your work fits in the context of a business. We've talked about this. I love that we're totally aligned on this, but you also have to be at a level that you're guiding a team and helping coach and manage them. So, I think that what I've been looking for is, again, that aligns to the seniority of a role, but a portfolio, a resume that shows progressive impact, a very clear outline of what your experience has been managing others. And, I do think that at first glance, hourly rate is an indicator of where somebody thinks they are. And that can at least help me level set, saying if somebody, I'll just throw out some numbers. These are not, I don't know how relevant these are these days, but like the average hourly rate for a creative director across the US, I don't know, probably depends on the region, let's call it $80 an hour, and some creative directors will scream at me and say I'm $350 an hour. And that's probably true in some regions and some capacities. But, I think that having a benchmark that says, okay, you're there, that's what I should expect to see from your portfolio then helps me gauge their own portfolio based on their rate. So if somebody says, hey, I'm $20 an hour, I'm going to expect that their work is, they're new to the scene. They're, probably a strong independent contributor. They're probably growing their skills, but they're not going to be like an expert level contributor. And if I start to see a mismatch of either of those things, like, wow, this is a really cheap rate for how great this work is, or that's an exorbitant rate for what this work is, that can be a flag to me that person doesn't understand where their level is, which in some cases prompts a discussion for me to say, hey, you should be charging more. And I've done that. Or for me to totally discard the conversation saying, you're out of your mind. What you're bringing to the table is not worth that rate.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you brought that up too, because I think I had similar experiences when I had, kind of vetted some of the talent going through application processes in the past and trying to
Yeah.
help find people to fit roles. Is I would do exactly that. It's like, okay, what are you listing as your hourly rate? And you're kind of using that, and as well as their explanation of what their skill set is, to get an understanding of, okay, rate plus your, what you see as your skill set plus what you're titling yourself as and your years of experience can give me already an understanding of, like, is there a mismatch here or not? And then if there isn't, you can go into the portfolio and say, okay, cool, you're backing up a lot of this with, specific instances of why this makes sense. And I think a lot of times what'll happen is, specifically on the director side of things, is you can see if they have people skills or not. I think that you could still get away with calling yourself a creative director if you're also then backing that up with, like, I am a freelance director and I work in this specific capacity. So I also think that a lot of that is, like, kind of what we said, role dependent and what you're applying for. And it's like, if you're applying for an in-house position and you're saying you're a director, but you've only ever done short little, couple week to month stints, the likelihood that you have the people skills necessary to jump into that full-time role is pretty slim to none. And you can usually get a feel for that based on, like, how they're laying out the information in their actual application.
Yeah, I think that that's true. And it's, again, context specific about what a company is really looking to hire for. So if that's what they need, then it's a great fit. But if you're looking for somebody, for a longer term contract, or you're looking to somebody to come in and help stand up a team, and they're going to be part of the hiring process, you really want to have evidence that they've had experience doing that before.
Yes, especially in the creative roles, because that is an entirely different experience. And a lot of
Absolutely.
times the skill set necessary to get to a certain level of, like, a senior level creative executor is entirely different than what it takes to step up to a director role and manage people. They are like hard skills versus soft skills, and you don't easily
Yep.
transition from one to another.
Yep. And one of the things that I, experienced certainly as a freelancer myself was the lack of external validation. Which I say it because I think that that's a very real point for a lot of people that in that position, where in a normal job, if you're doing a good job, you're getting a promotion, you're getting a title change, you're getting a raise. But as a freelancer, you're almost never in the position that somebody is saying, hey, you should change your title and I'm going to pay you more. You have to come up with those decision points and those validation points for yourself. And I think personally that the key to getting work at that next level is to be brutally honest with yourself about your experience and capabilities, and communicating that in a way that's really authentic. Like, have you decided that it's time to change your rate or time to change your title throughout your freelance career?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of my career, I was a little more aggressive about this. And I think it's because I was seeing, like, that disconnect between where I felt like I was at and what title I felt like I could get versus what it seemed like was being given to me. So I think part of that comes in just kind of having enough experiences to gut check yourself to say, like, am I sitting in the right spot? Yes or no? And then being able to kind of accept that answer. And I think a lot of times when you get the mismatch is someone saying, I think I have this skill set, and really they don't have enough gut check to say, like, hey, you really don't. But after that, I think as I got a little further into my career, I kind of chilled out on that a little bit, and just allowed other people to help me understand when that's happening. Because I think what happens in a freelance capacity is, as you're upskilling, which I think we'll get to here in a little bit, you kind of start to get that feedback naturally, where someone will introduce you as the next level up and you've never really done that yourself. And I think, to me, that's a great indicator of saying, okay, they think I have the skill set here. And
That's a great
once you get
example.
that happening a few times, you can confidently say, okay, people see me as that now, even though I don't necessarily, you know, feel
Yeah.
like I've quite gotten there yet.
Right. Right. So you mentioned upskilling. I think that that's definitely an important piece of this kind of self-managed career path that freelancers take on. The idea of ongoing training is what we're talking about, upskilling. And as we were talking about just a couple minutes ago, it's a big pro because it means that you can grow in whatever direction you want. But it's a con for freelancers because it means that, again, the onus is on you to put that initiative forward. And also the practicality is like, you've got to take time out of your paid hours each week to dedicate to outside learning. And so a lot of skills that may be gained on the job in a full-time salaried role, or that maybe your company would be paying to train you, are going to be things that you have to take on outside of your day-to-day paid work. So I think it's definitely a factor in how much time each week you can dedicate to outside learning. But I think that the net result, as I was saying, is like, there's a ton of statistics that show this, like freelancers are aggressively learning new skills because it makes them more marketable. And every project, that they take on gives an opportunity to apply those new skills, which in turn then lets you talk about actually having them and apply them in practice. And here's the results for your next gig. So it's a very quick way to, get yourself up the ladder. How have you approached upskilling on, in your realm?
Yeah. So the way that I tend to look at this is kind of from the perspective of, is it something that I'm doing currently with a client that allows me to kind of dig into the next level of it? Because it's a similar mindset to the 9 to 5 where, maybe you're not necessarily having the company outright pay for it up front for you then to use later. You're kind of front loading your resources into getting that learning yourself. And then in a few months to a few years, it comes back full circle and helps you to kind of get to those next levels of either a title bump or pay bump, or, work into deeper connections with clients that allow you the ability to go do more and better work. And it kind of feeds into itself. So I think that's kind of the mindset end of it for me. The other more tactical end is looking at it. I had seen this great graphic online that just summarizes so well. It was like on the bottom, you have skills and knowledge, which end up being breadth across. And then you have experience, which is depth. And the more you can build skills and knowledge either way, and then also use that to build depth in experience, those kind of 3 points end up growing the pie that you're able to kind of build into what your career is. And I think I'd always kind of done that naturally. But when I had the graphic presented, I was like, I wish I would have had this earlier in my career, because it gives you a better roadmap and gut check for how to continue your growth.
Yeah, that clicks. I can see it.
Cool. Well, I think that's about all we have for today. It was great chatting with you, Ray. I appreciate it.
As always.
And if you found this useful or not, follow us here and over on LinkedIn for more tips on how you can get the most of working with and as freelance talent.
Thanks a bunch. Chat next time.